Thank you to everybody who's joining. Hope you're all having a good week, or you've had a good week and you've got some fun things planned for this weekend. I think I'm going to just jump right in. Just kind of, I don't have as many questions this week, which is fine. So I think I'm just going to kind of talk about what I have. If you have a question, feel free to send it in. I can field questions in the chat too. All right. First question. It says, in your latest post, you discuss slowing down the school day. Could you talk more about how you do this with all of the stuff teachers have to do? That's a great question. So the post that they're referring to, I wrote a piece on Monday about slowing down. It's called On Slowness, and I talk a lot about this idea that I came across called slow pedagogy. Whether or not you're familiar with the term is unnecessary. You don't need to be familiar with that specific term. But it's in line with this movement of like slow eating, slow living, being more mindful, and just kind of taking it in one thing at a time instead of trying to multitask and just consume, consume, consume. I have been doing some form of slow teaching on and off for years because honestly, it was the only way that I could survive the pace of school. Like so many things come at us so quickly that I feel like I needed ways to like shut myself out from the chaos of the other school building or the district or whatever, just public education in general, and really just focus on doing things thoughtfully and with intention and doing them well. That was my idea. So in the piece, I talk about having a soft start. I really started that during pandemic time because we were offering free breakfasts and kids were coming in eating their breakfast, and there was really no point to come in and just jump right into learning. So we did a soft start. I've always played music in my classroom. I've got a lot of music posters up behind me, my turntables over there. So play a lot of music. We have a lot of music breaks where we're just, I try and resist the transition a lot. So like, for example, what are other things you have to do? Really, I just try and slow the transitions down in between. So a soft start, slow transitions. In the piece, I talk about going for a walk every day with my kids, which is great. We play music and do a lap. So those are just some of the ways. But if I wanted to go into more detail, I mean, there is a lot of stuff. I'm not going to lie. There's a lot of stuff that teachers have to do with their students. There's a scope and sequence that's this big. It's even bigger than this, and you have so many days to try and cover it all. And I'm going to be honest, I really just don't get to everything. I really try and take a lens of what is the most important things or the important thing my students need from me right now. Is it a specific standard? Am I going to focus on one standard for, gosh, a week until I just make sure that they have that standard? Is it a social emotional piece? There's no point in trying to teach a lesson when half of my class is coming in from recess and there's a fight that broke out or there's some drama happening on the basketball court. You can't just jump right into academics. School is a microcosm of society and life happens. Life is happening with my students on the playground field and in my classroom in real time. And so when things happen, I try and adjust things accordingly. And I really just try and be mindful that I'm giving my kids what they need. Now, does that lead to some stressful times, especially at the end of the week? Yes, absolutely. I usually do a punch list on Fridays of our Friday to-dos. And sometimes it's quite ambitious. Other times it's just a few things that I really want to hit very, very well. And I just do whatever we try and get done that week. We try and get done that week. And if we don't get it done, we give ourselves grace and we push it into the next week. So I'm a huge proponent of soft due dates. Obviously, we just ended our trimester, so we've got report cards coming out today. At some point, things have got to get turned in, but I really just want my students to know that we are trying to be flexible and adaptive to everyone's needs, and care is a big part of that. So I wish I could say that like I can be mindful and be slow and still do all of the things. That's not true. Things have to get cut, and so that's when I really just use my expertise and my experience as an educator and looking at what I'm teaching and just focusing on the most important things and trying to teach those things really, really well, even if it means going slow. I have a bad habit of when I get excited, I tend to talk quickly and talk really excitedly and animatedly. Um, and so that's something that I've had to work on, especially when I get excited about a specific concept or a connection that somebody's making. I tend to go really, really fast. So w- another way is that I just try and be more mindful of the speed of my speech. um, I draw lots of pictures. I take time to draw pictures when I'm talking because I want my students to just take time sitting with concepts instead of this idea of like explain, cover, move on, explain, cover, move on. Um, and it's a daily grind. It's a daily challenge to try and resist um, the push to just try and get through the curriculum. And to it looks like Robbie's point, absolutely, the experiences are inauthentic, right? And so I am usually, not usually, I am almost guaranteed to be behind my teammates in terms of our curriculum maps. I'm always behind. Um, do I feel like my kids aren't prepared for the next grade level because I didn't cover all the things? Absolutely not. I make sure that my students are ready to go, both academically, mentally, socially, emotionally. That's my primary focus. That's what I have the most vested interest in. If I don't teach every single little concept, I'm okay with that. And so, honestly, I've made that decision over time. I've only recently been just more. Out loud about it that this is what I'm doing, like naming it as a slowness because I am 22 years into this profession, and if I'm going to last another 10 years, I need to create things that are going to make this sustainable. And if the first 20 years was go, 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 grind, 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 I need ways of slowing down if I want to be a good educator for the last 10 years. So it's just a chance for me to just be more mindful and make my classroom really cater to what my students need. If they need a timeout, they need some time to take deep breaths. I've got this little area that I'm in right now. It's called our cozy corner. If they need a moment outside, like it's really just about treating my students with humanity, treating them like people who need things, and they're not robots, and we're not going to push, push, push. Um, and I mean, if you are in the position of feeling like the pressure to push, I would urge you to consider how good of a job you're doing as a teacher when you're pushing, pushing, pushing. I find that my best instructional practices do not happen when I'm rushing. I find that when I'm trying to get to a solution, it doesn't go well. I don't see the kid in front of me. I'm not really listening to what they're saying. So I really just, it's a good practice. I urge you to just try and be more mindful in what you're doing and slow things down, even if it's just small things like the soft start in the morning. That was one small thing I did to just try and like ease into our day, especially Mondays. I don't know what it is about Mondays. My kids come in and they are exhausted and they are not in a school frame of mind. Um, and so I need to transition into learning. We have to like get into a place where they can start learning again. It requires me going out, asking how their weekend was, making sure they've eaten. Have you eaten breakfast? How are you feeling? Like there's a lot to go into just kind of prepare the room for learning to happen. You can't just jump right into a lesson or a learning experience. So, um, okay, let's see. What else do I have? This next one is really important. This is such a challenging time of year. Absolutely, this is a very, very challenging time of year. I always say the time between January 1st, so the end of the start of the new year, and spring break is like really a dark, deep pit. I don't want to go too far, but it's like a pit of despair because there's not a lot of breaks. In Colorado, we still get snow up through March, so we could be, it's supposed to snow like 2 feet next week. There's a good chance we might get a snow day if we're lucky. Who knows? But it's just a lot of just put your head down and get through it. There's conferences in that time. There's report cards in that time. There's a lot of just kind of winter assessments, common formative assessments that happen in that time, and so it's a lot of just like it's a long stretch. And so when this person says it's such a challenging time, I totally hear you. It is a very challenging time. So the question is, how do you stay motivated to plan and teach learning experiences? Um, Again, that's a really good question. How do I stay motivated? Oh, um, well, the first thing I do is I make a practice of really trying to leave school at school. Um, I mean, I used to be the teacher that brought everything home. You know, get it all done in the evenings, work in the evenings, work until bedtime, stay up late, grade on the weekends. Um, and so by leaving stuff at school, it gives me a break. It gives me a nice bookend to my day, and it gives me time to start filling my own bucket and replenishing my own spirit before going into the next day. So that's the first thing I think helps with my motivation is just putting like leaving school at school. Um, I do have it. I do have an exception. I wish I could say I'm perfect, but I do plan and do some things for the upcoming week on Sunday afternoons. So I do break my own rule. I completely see that. But I try and like Friday afternoon, like when I'm done with this live stream, I'm going to unplug and not touch anything until Sunday afternoon. So that's one thing. The second thing is having a vested interest in my students' lives. I think helps. It's funny when I know my kids really, really well, my students really, really well, if I see something, if I see a YouTube video or a TED Talk or I read about something, it will remind me of one of my students. And, oh, you know what? So and so would really that ties into what so and so is reading right now. Or I have a student who is a thespian, okay, an actor, and anytime I see something about projecting your voice or about overcoming stage fright, I think of that person. I think of that student. Um, and I know they're not always going to be academic, but those little things I think help keep my spirit up and they keep me thinking about my kids. Um, if I think about the job, if I think about all the things I have to do, if I think about the the business of teaching, the systems and structures and the stuff of public education, then I lose my motivation. Um, Full stop. It's very easy to deplete my motivation when I'm thinking about admin and state testing and curriculum and all that stuff. When I think about my kids, it tends to have the exact opposite effect. It spurs, it gets my motivation going. I get excited about showing my kids this thing that I found over the weekend or this idea that I have about a learning experience. So some of my favorite learning experiences started as just a spark of an idea that I got from a student. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to design a learning experience around this. We can tie it to a standard and put it with the stuff that we're learning, and it's like really exciting. So I find myself telling my class quite often like, hey, I want to show you something, I want to check this out. And it's different because it's like they know that I'm the teacher and they know that I'm trying to teach them something, but it's a subtle way of being like, I'm really excited to show you this thing that I think you're going to like or that I think you're going to have some sort of connection to. um, and so that really helps with my motivation too, because it helps me just stay excited about teaching. It stays excited about what we're doing. Um, and so, like, for example, we're doing this March Book Madness where we're reading a bunch of books as a class. We started in February when the book release or the book list got released, but it's 8 and 8. And voting starts next week. And we've been slowly doing book talks and book trailers all throughout. But it's so much fun because when I see something about one of the books or like a connection to something that's happening, I will bring it to the class attention and say, hey, guys, I just read this thing in this book. Doesn't that remind you a lot of this character in this book? It's something that gets me excited, and it helps me, I think, maintain motivation because it asks, "How do you stay motivated?" Those are the little ways that I stay motivated. Um, bit at school, put it down, and then come back. Like I tell my students, I do a hard reboot every every afternoon, so that in the morning they get me, and I'm fresh. I don't hold grudges. I don't, linger on things that I felt or thought about the next day. I try and just make each day new and fresh, which I think does help with. That's one way, or that's just another way to help me kind of stay motivated. I think a couple questions have come in. Looks like Ravi, you sub for fourth and hey, it's live. We've got announcements happening. Formulaic, lacked personality. How do we train new teachers better? That's a really good question. Um, Many teachers could be replaced by robots. I hate that, but I think that's getting to the point. I think we're very close to that. To your question, I wonder if what you're meaning, and maybe you can clarify about their predictable and formulaic. I'm wondering if it has to do with following a standardized curriculum, like a scripted curriculum. I find that when I see new teachers scripting their lessons through the curriculum and just reading what's on the script, then very much it lacks personality. Then it very much feels very scripted and formulaic. So I'm wondering if that's what you mean, Robbie, by that. Um, how do we train new teachers? This is a hard thing because when you're a new teacher, you are unsure of your abilities as a teacher. You rely on standardized curriculum. You feel, yes, they feel bound to the curriculum. And I think that that's a fair and honest thing. There's nothing wrong with feeling like I need to have this curriculum to help me become a better teacher. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Um, I think that it would be too overwhelming if we just threw out all of our standardized curriculum and then just said, you know what, figure out how you're going to teach all these standards. Especially for a new teacher, that would be incredibly overwhelming. I think a lot of veteran teachers would like that freedom to be able to stray from a standardized curriculum. So, one thing I think we can do, actually, two things I think we can do to help train new teachers. The first one is I think teacher prep programs need to do a better job of teaching new teachers how to understand their state standards and how to navigate those standards and how to look at benchmarks and substandards. I think that part of, especially if they're a content specialist, if they're going to teach sixth grade science, man, they better know those science standards front and back, and not just like on their own reading them and memorizing, but really internalizing what the standards are. Because I think too often when you are tied to that curriculum, you forget about the standards and you focus on the modules and the units and the lessons. So you forget, you're like, oh, I teach US history in fifth grade. That's what we teach in fifth grade. If I focus on the standardized curriculum, then I'm like, okay, what lesson am I on next? Okay, that's 13 colonies. That's the next unit. Then after that, we're gonna do the Revolutionary War. Like that's not focusing on standards. That's focusing on a sequential set, like a timeline of events or scripted lessons or units. Right? This unit on the 13 colonies. This unit on um, the American Revolution. But when I start thinking about the standards, like I want my students to be critically analyzing historical sources from multiple points of view. I want my students to be able to understand how the culture and geography and the economy affect what's happening. Those are not tied to a specific event or a lesson. They're tied to thinking, which is what I think new teachers need help doing. So I think there should be a lot of teacher prep programs that focus on teaching teachers how to think critically about their content. The second thing, so knowing the standards, teaching young teachers to know the standards. And then I think young teachers, new teachers, not young, but just new teachers, um, this is where a strong administration really, really helps. If you can allow your teachers to have the freedom to go off script in an exploratory way. So what I mean by that is oftentimes teachers are just scared to not teach to to the actual lesson, not follow the curriculum guide, not be in the workbook on the same page as their teammates. And a good administrator can say, look, focus on the standards, use the curriculum guides, use the scripts to help you get good with addressing your class and phrasing abstract concepts in a concrete way. Like, let it help you and guide you with the teaching piece, but don't feel bound to it. Um, and experiment. Like, talk to other people. How are they teaching that standard? And honestly, I think it just takes time. And I think that when you follow a scripted curriculum, to Robbie's point, it begins to feel very much like it's robotic. And that is when teachers will be replaced by robots, when there is no more human element to teaching and learning. And it's just following a set of modules, following a set of lessons that can be done online with AI, especially with AI now. Um, and so I think that's one way, or a couple ways that I think we can really help new teachers just feel more emboldened to be like, you know what, I'm going to focus on this one skill set. Maybe it's adding and subtract, or adding number, or multiplying two-digit numbers by two-digit numbers. Well, you can follow the scripted curriculum to teach that concept, or you can find other ways to teach something that may not be how your kids, or that might relate to your students better. Because I'll tell you, I've never had a student in a lesson um, follow the script the way they're supposed to. They never answer me the way that it says they're supposed to answer. So it's like the scripted kids are not your kids, and so I think that's an important thing to remember. So that's a great question. Thank you. Hopefully, I didn't go on too long for that. Um, I don't think content delivery is a primary function anymore, but many teachers still do that. Absolutely. Again, Robbie, that's a great point. We are not. I wrote this piece a while back. Teachers, we don't deliver content. You deliver pizzas, right? You deliver pizzas. That's your job as a pizza delivery person. We are not content delivery people. We're meant to really just inspire kids to love learning and teach them how to think and learn for themselves. Because at the end of the day, we're not always going to be there to be teaching them. They need to learn how to learn themselves and learn where their strengths are, where their challenges lie, and realize that everyone is capable of learning. Every single person is capable of learning, and not just learning basics. I'm talking about everyone is capable of learning at high levels, at great depths, and being really sophisticated with what they learn. Everyone is. Everyone, no matter your age, skin color, race, ethnicity, religion, anything. None of that matters. Everyone is capable of learning, but we have to teach our kids how to learn. I think that's a big part of it. So I think that's a great point, Ravi. Um, let's see if there's any other questions coming in here. Let's see. The difference between authentic and inauthentic learning experiences. Let's see. I would say when I use the word authentic, I'm thinking of meaningful. There used to be a phrase that was thrown around a lot, like tying it to the real world. I still like that phrase, but oftentimes our kids, we're not really living in the real world in that sense. Like I wanted to tie it to my students and tie it to their lives. Make it make meaning for them. Help them find meaning in those things themselves. And so when I think of authentic, I think of meaningful, and meaningful to my students, my specific students. Now, do I have am I 100% great at all of that? Do I make or do I make learning meaningful for all of my students all the time? No. I mean, I have my struggles. I have my challenges. I have my blind spots, but those are things that I'm working towards. I think on inauthentic experience or an inauthentic concept is very much just something that you're learning, but you don't really see the purpose in learning it. Is that question like, Mission Neibauer, why do I have to learn this again? Why do I have to know this? If you can't answer that question, that's a really interesting question in of itself. Why do I need to learn this? So I think those where you're just teaching just because it says to teach, those are inauthentic, but an authentic is a meaningful. And it doesn't mean that like there are things that are meaningless. I think that there's different levels of meaning, but I think certain things can be prioritized and be more meaningful than others. So that's a good one. Let's see. Anything else? I don't know. I think that might be it. I kind of like just having a few questions. Man, it is a tough time of year, so I really appreciate you guys who are joining me this afternoon. It is a challenging time of year. Whether you're starting a new trimester or you've started a new semester already, I'm really just grateful that you're here, and I'm grateful that you're asking questions and being a part of this. Um, Thank you for coming. I hope you all had a great week and you find a way to refill your buckets this weekend, kind of replenish your spirit so that you can start next week um, with a bang. I know that it's going to be a rough week for me because I've got 27 students, so I've got 27 conferences signed up. So it's going to be some late nights, but I just appreciate you. If you have any questions that I didn't get a chance to answer and you want to answer them, feel free to drop them in the chat, whether for this broadcast or just my chat in general. But I really appreciate you all being here. Thank you. Thank you. Have a great weekend, and I will see you later. Bye.